Hello and welcome to Neighbors Talking with Naya Daur TV. This is Ayesha Siddiqa. And here I have today with me Dr. Turab Hussain, Associate Professor and Head of Department of Economics, Lahore University of Management Sciences. But I have Dr. Turab Hussain not because he is, teaching economics, but he has been involved with India-Pakistan trade negotiations for quite some time, especially after between, if please correct me, from 2007 or 2006 onwards till 2015 or 2017. So, Dr. Turab Hussain, welcome to the show.
Thank
And
you very much, Asha.
And I'll start with, with this question. We are talking about India-Pakistan peace, India-Pakistan trade.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of pick your brains on how possible is it?
Okay, so just a little clarification. I used to be the chair of the department, but since the last 3, 4 years, I'm no more the chair, which is excellent. So just my minor
Okay,
clarification there. So how possible is it? Well, in the current scenario, you see, things seem extremely difficult. And it's primarily, as you know, because of the political relations between the two countries that perhaps it's been at the moment we're in the worst possible scenario. I mean, I don't remember things being this bad in the last 15 to 20 years. There were
hmm,
obviously episodes, I think, in 1999 where there was a lot of tension at the border. But frankly, I mean, there was a thaw in relationship starting from 2002, 2003 onwards. But since I think 2015, 16, things have really gone south. So
right.
at the moment, things are very hard, very difficult. And I don't foresee a major change in relations unless something unexpected happens, which is also a possibility between the two countries.
Sure. And one will keep hoping. But could you share with us, what you saw, what transpired when negotiations were happening? I mean, I gather from you that there was a lot of ground covered.
Yeah. So I think it all started, as you very well know, and as people in the audience would also know, that around, I believe it was 2001 and 2002, when there was the first Toyin relationship. Musharraf government was there in Pakistan, and on the other hand, you had the Congress government in India. So I think it was the Congress. I might be wrong
Yeah,
if
yes,
you
yes,
can
it was a
correct me.
Congress government.
So, and it's in
No,
economic trade
actually,
relations. Yeah,
sorry to correct you, it wasn't the Congress government. Actually, it was still the Vajpayee government
it
because
was still the
2004.
Vajpayee government. It was still
Yeah,
the You're absolutely right. So anyway. So it started with in economic terms. We used to have both India and Pakistan. They had a negative list. So
right.
India had given Pakistan MFN in 1996, but
Okay.
Pakistan used to maintain a positive list of items. So positive list meaning that there was certain items, not that many, which were allowed to trade, which we could import from India. India had
Right.
given Pakistan MFN back in 1996 under the WTO provisions and so on. But because India's average tariff rates historically had been higher, so Pakistan chose not to give or reciprocate. Anyway, so we had a positive list, which was during Musharraf's time, which was converted into a negative list. So negative list meaning that there were more items which were allowed to be imported from India, and there was a negative list of items which were considered to be sensitive, which were not allowed. Otherwise, trade started, and I
So,
think it
so,
picked up.
so, so,
Yeah,
so कॉमन
go ahead.
आदमी के लिए नेगेटिव लिस्ट वो थी जो कि चीजें आप नहीं
नहीं
मंगवा
नहीं
सकते थे.
मंगवा सकते बिल्कुल.
Okay.
So basically that meant moving from positive list to negative list meant that you had more items which could be imported from India.
Okay.
And so
Right.
and the negative list gradually was being reduced.
ठीक है.
So then, and the whole idea was come 2010-11, after Musharraf went and the People's Party government came in, the whole effort was that you move towards normalization of economic relations, obviously political relations also, and at the same time, Pakistan should eventually give MFN to India. It should reciprocate it's a member of the WTO and it has to give MFN to member countries.
ठीक.
So anyway, so we were moving towards that. The work which we initially had done was actually, I remember, in 2004, 2005, and that was primarily focused on agricultural trade in wheat and sugar, and we assessed the welfare impacts, and welfare impacts were to a great extent positive if we had started trading in agriculture. The second
Right.
set of work which we started was around, I believe it was 2009 or 10. And this was looking at
Okay.
the potential impact of giving MFN to India and then
Okay.
moving towards a free trade sort of relation under SAFTA, South Asian Free Trade Arrangement with India and neighboring countries.
Right.
And by and large, again, I mean, that work, both sort of the empirical, quantitative work and qualitative work suggested that trade would be beneficial, obviously, for both countries. Obviously, there were certain sectors which would have lost out in the short term, but by and large, the overall effects were positive. And the estimations, according to, so there were various studies which were done. So estimations, according to
Right.
what is called the gravity framework. So this is an economic framework we use to
Hmm.
assess what would be the potential amount of trade. So
Right.
trade between India and Pakistan after the movement from positive to negative list had gone up to around $2 billion. Okay, so
Okay. Like that was
2
actually
2.5.
happening.
That was actually happening. And this is, by the way, formal trade, not through the informal channels, which are through Afghanistan and through Dubai. So this is formal trade,
ठीक.
which was being, yeah, exactly. So, so the estimates were that trade could potentially go up to 20 to $30 billion. In fact, there were
Oh,
some
wow.
estimates to 30 to 40 billion. So there was and this is based on the fact that both countries obviously are neighboring economies. They share a very long border, so they're in some sense natural trading partners. Pre 1947 was one country. Secondly, these are two very large economies. India is a very, very big economy. Pakistan is also a growing economy, and so on, with a very large population. So large markets. So the estimated trade was a lot. And we had gone through, just to get an assessment of what the stakeholder views were, we went to various sectors across the country, really. I mean, we spoke to textile, garment sector, we spoke
Right.
to sports goods, surgical, light engineering, all that, the farmers association. So by and large, as I mentioned, they were positive. The sectors which are exporting sector in the country, those are,
Hmm.
as it is, competitive sectors. So they saw a great opportunity. I mean, textile and garments, for example, saw a great opportunity. Sports goods, surgical items saw a great opportunity. Sectors, not just in terms of sort of a larger market, but also in terms of getting important raw material, essential raw material from India,
Right.
cheaper than
Right.
perhaps from China in a greater variety. Okay. And if you have both China and India supplying raw material or machinery, that competition leads to better quality, better prices, and so on. So the producer, manufacturer, and exporter was to gain from normalization of trade. Agriculture obviously had some issues. They had concerns about the fact that their productivity is higher in India. There's a lot of price support in India. There are a lot of subsidies which are given. So it's not quite a level playing field. But even there, there was a lot of headway in talks. The Farmers Association in Pakistan met with the associations in India, and they worked out a tariff cum quota regime to look at or to manage trade in agriculture even. And I remember that during the time when the People's Party government was there, there was there's another very important development, which was a big step. Um, One was joint chambers of commerce. There was a south and the
Acha.
north chamber of commerce. So there was Mumbai, Karachi, South chamber, joint chamber, and then the north, Lahore, and across in East Punjab, Amritsar, and Jalandhar, these parts. So they had
No,
this
this was
started.
being discussed. This this was being discussed, or were these Chamber of Commerce actually opened?
They were open joint chambers. They had working committees, and these working committees were in different subsectors. I remember attending subcommittee meetings in Lahore, where you had businessmen in India who'd flown in, and they were talking to businessmen in Pakistan, traders, businessmen, manufacturers, all that. all sorts, and across different business associations. Now, the benefit of that was that one of the complaints which Pakistani manufacturers, exporters had vis-a-vis trade with India was that India might have reduced its tariff rates, but it had a lot of non-tariff barriers. Okay, so these are
ठीक.
customs procedures, quality requirements, so on, which was a huge obstacle or hindrance to trade. Now, when the traders, the manufacturers, the businessmen sat together, they could identify what those were. Okay,
Hmm.
so and those were identified, and then the case was made to the respective governments. And I do recall that some of those NTBs, which India had, for example, were removed. So in cement, Pakistan, was exporting cement to India, but the problem was the Indians required quality certifications by their own laboratories, and that used to take time,
Right,
demolition
right.
costs used to be and so it was increasing the cost of trade. So then I remember it was they started accepting the quality, whatever certification of Pakistani labs. Likewise, there
Hmm.
were other cases also where these NTBs were removed. So, movement was being made. Another major NTB between the two countries is visa. Visa is a major non-tariff barrier. So if I'm a businessman and I want to explore a market, across, I need to travel in that country, make contacts, and so on. But unfortunately, that was not being done that easily because of the fact that you just got a city visa. A lot of times these were reporting
Hmm.
visas,
Hmm.
and so on. So, and you'd remember that, there was a lot of movement and progress on that. So they were moving towards maybe getting rid of the city visa requirements,
For
getting
businessmen.
for businessmen, having more flexibility in them traveling in India and they coming into Pakistan and traveling to Pakistan. So there's a lot of progress which was being made, okay, at that time. And one would have thought that MFN was just something which was inevitable and Pakistan would give it. There was at that time there was also resistance coming from some very conservative right-wing parties, with the Pakistan, you would remember
Hmm.
this sort
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
platform, you know,
Exactly. Correct.
and they were in Pakistan. Unfortunately, a lot of our journalists, the most favored nation was literally translated into "सबसे पसंदीदा मुल्क."
More.
So this entire criticism came that how could we suddenly make India "सबसे पसंदीदा मुल्क," but strict, it doesn't mean that. And more MFN just means
Right,
that you
right.
don't discriminate negatively against a trading partner. So you give it exactly the same tariff as you do your other trading partners. But
ठीक.
anyway, so it was misrepresented. People were not really aware of what MFN really was. So then the term was changed to NDMA, non-discriminatory market access. Just ताकि
Okay.
वो
ठीक.
सबसे पसंदीदा को हटा के NDMA कर ले. Anyway, so
But
खैर any so वो भी हाँ जी
हो गया.
अब
वो भी हो गया.
हाँ
No,
जी
no, but I'm butting in because I
yeah,
remember
sure.
कि by the time ये NDMA को इन्होंने convert किया, I mean they changed the term. तो तब तक
Yeah, yeah,
तो the initiative was kind of lost because MFN, it was I remember end of People's Party government,
yeah, yeah.
and Pakistan was ready for MFN.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then agriculture lobby came in and said कि हमसे तो पूछा नहीं है, and MFN देने लगे हैं without taking our uh, matters into consideration.
So agriculture lobby protests happened earlier on, but उनका जो major representative body है, जो आपकी farmer
Right,
associate FAP है, FAP
right.
में the chairman and उनके साथ जो थे, I'm not going to name names, but we spoken to them. They had visited India. They had spoken to their counterparts, and they had sort of managed this negotiation, which was there was a timeline under which this was supposed to agricultural trade was supposed to be relaxed. So the tariff quota arrangement was कि basically एक certain quota amount करेंगे आप, and if the prices fall down, which will hurt sort of import of agricultural items say products say, अगर prices गिरती हैं तो then a tariff would be imposed. So this was a tariff cum quota arrangement which they had negotiated. So that's what I'm saying. Even in agriculture, there was a lot of headway made. There were initially protests, but uske baad jab FAP at least, jab inki, when they negotiated and spoke to their counterparts, so they were moving towards some form of an arrangement even there. एनडीएमए उसी टाइम पे आता है जस्ट
Right,
बिकॉज एक
right.
प्रेस में ये शुरू हो जाती है बात ये वो but then what happens is if you remember there's a change in government here in Pakistan so the PMLN comes into power and they were also I mean like the People's
Yeah,
Party they were forwarding the whole agenda of normalization of trade with India. But they waited for some time, and they waited because in 2013 they came to power. 2014 में India elections थी, so they were told or whatever advice that you should give MFN or NDMA to the coming new BJP government, which was the Modi government. Okay, just to
right,
sort of
right,
have a nice, good sort of start to a relationship. Okay.
right, right, right.
So, unfortunately, then from 2014 onwards, the things which sort of panned out, that really, and then there were issues which started at the border, between India and Pakistan, आपके आज़ाद कश्मीर में and साथ, तो उसकी वजह से फिर then, this started to be rolled back, unfortunately, during
So you were
the
suggesting, I mean, in a way, it seems that had Pakistan given MFN to
yeah.
India when it was ready, they should have.
They should have. They shouldn't
रुक
have waited.
हाँ रुके तो वो इनिशिएटिव जो है वो द मोमेंट वाज लॉस्ट.
They lost. Hmm.
Right,
Yep, very much so.
right.
So I feel that that was, in some sense, one of those critical moments in Pakistan's history. Why? Because our regional relations and relationship with India has such an impact also domestically on our economy. And you know what the reasons are.
Hmm, hmm.
We have been a security state primarily because of our relationship with India for last 4 5 decades. So that real movement towards sort of economic development, economic growth, moving resources, okay, to the development sector, releasing certain budgetary resources and really investing in the people of your own country, and then really enjoying the gains from trade with India. वो जो एक moment था वो we've lost. And as I said,
Hmm,
अगर वो
hmm.
हो जाता तो trade there's a snowball effect, in the sense that, as I said, estimates were that trade could have gone up anywhere between 20 to 30 billion dollars, even
Oh
if it
wow.
had gone up from 2 billion to 5 or 6 billion dollars in the next 2 or 3 years. That would have created stakeholders on both sides of the border. Now the problem is that when trade is so low, it is between $1 to $2 billion, and there's hardly any investment across and so on. So the cost of not talking or not having normal political relations, economic cost is very low. Okay,
Right,
and there
right.
hardly any sort of vested interest on both sides of the border. So when your trade actually picks up and becomes sort of a substantial amount, then you create vested interest across both sides of the border. And then you think twice before severing relations because the cost becomes high. So that is the argument. So if Pakistan had given MFN, if trade had picked up, and things would have been different. And another चीज जो a lot of people criticize कि जी इंडिया की देखिए import जो है वो आपसे बहुत ज्यादा होती, bilateral trade deficit होता. You don't, you look at trade with China, you have a huge bilateral trade deficit because you cannot potentially have a trade surplus with China. China is a
Hmm,
much
hmm.
larger economy, so you will always have a trade deficit. So but you look at the fact that you look at your multilateral trade deficit, आप अपना overall देखते हैं, you can get, as I said, you're not just getting finished products from across the border, you'll be getting raw material, capital goods, machinery, chemicals, which will be lowering the cost of your production, industrial production, manufacturing production, और फिर service trade का भी बड़ा scope है. ठीक है, सो उससे आपकी जो है ओवरऑल कॉस्ट कम होती हैं, तो आप वही चीज कम कॉस्ट में डोमेस्टिकली प्रोड्यूस करके यू कैन एक्सपोर्ट एल्सवेयर, so your exports
Hmm,
pick
hmm,
up.
hmm.
So Anyway, so the point is that moment was lost. We could have, in 2, 3 years' time, gotten to a much larger figure in terms of trade. We could have had stakeholders on both sides of the border, which would have been the constituencies of peace, actually, which would
So,
have developed.
let me go back to the question.
Yeah,
कि so you're saying कि क्योंकि अभी ट्रेड नहीं है ज्यादा,
yeah,
therefore businessmen on their side, on India's side, and businessmen on Pakistani side are not howling and badgering their governments to
yeah.
improve relations because they don't have stakes or they have lower stakes, right?
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. So for them, I mean, why they know that the obstacle is so big. It's that why waste money? Why waste your breath on something? Waste your time on something which is not gonna come to anything. So, and because, as you said, there are no stakes, there are no major stakes. So if had there been those stakes,
Hmm.
and there were businessmen were seeing the opportunity back then, and they were pushing it, and there was government intent also. Okay, and also intent of the establishment. Frankly, it was not just out of thin air that this was happening. So all
Yeah,
actors seem to be.
that's a question which I was about to ask. क्योंकि
Yeah,
हमारे यहाँ
yeah.
वो कहते हैं कि establishment pulls back. So what was the role of the establishment?
So as far as I know, I think they were pretty much on board, at least when the People's Party government was in power. Musharraf के टाइम पे तो वो issue as such नहीं था to that extent, but जब आपकी democracy was restored in the country, when People's Party was there, so the only issue which the establishment had was that to keep them in the loop and keep them informed and have them, part of all these discussions. So that was the main thing, and which was there at that time. It is only when PMLN comes in that link is severed to some extent, and then mistrust and so on, which is inherent between
Hmm,
the
hmm.
PMLN and the establishment, that came in. Unfortunately, things which were perhaps institutionalized during the People's Party government, okay, became very personal, okay, and you know the story.
Hmm. So
So links were
2015.
personalized rather than institutionalized as the People's Party government. So that had a major impact on
So
sort of the progress of.
पीपल्स पार्टी गवर्नमेंट ने इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज कर लिए थे रिलेशंस एंड
Yeah, yeah,
स्पेशली हाउ टू मूव
exactly.
फॉरवर्ड विद ट्रेड
How to move
and
forward, exactly.
PMLN में because it was personalized or they tried to personalize it as well. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the international relations theory is that, when
Mhm.
leaders at the top have personal relations and then things get going. I mean, we had Nawaz Sharif here, we had
Yeah, yeah.
Narendra Modi there.
Yeah.
So, but you think that that didn't work.
It could have worked had the relationship between Mia Nawaz Sharif and maybe the military establishment been of more trust, perhaps. I think there was some issue there also in terms of trust and so on. There was a history, unfortunately, there, and so in a perhaps if that trust had been there, that personal relationship would have been a positive factor. But it turned out to be actually a negative factor. Okay, this was adding greater mistrust or increasing mistrust between the establishment and the political party in power, uh, rather than helping them.
So, so could we suggest then
That's just my reading. That's just my
yeah,
reading of it.
no, we were
Yeah,
just thinking about it because we want this to move on. I mean,
yeah,
South Asia has to start behaving more normally,
yes,
like
yes.
other nations.
Hmm.
Um, so, is it fair to assume that had the Modi visit of 2015 been handled differently, जरा ज्यादा इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज उसको कर लेते और लोगों को भी बिठा देते उस मीटिंग में तो शायद ब्रेक ना आता.
बिल्कुल, I completely agree with you. I think वो और जैसे पहले जॉइंट चेम्बर्स थे, पर्सनलाइज्ड मीटिंग्स ना होती, थ्रू जॉइंट चेम्बर्स होती, इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज्ड होती, सारे जो आपके मेजर स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं उन्हें इंक्लूड किया जाता, उन्हें कॉन्फिडेंस में लिया जाता, एक बड़ी स्ट्रैटेजी बनती ऑफ नॉर्मलाइजिंग रीजनल रिलेशंस, ट्रेड रिलेशंस विद इंडिया. So we would not have been in the situation we're in. So, or we more recently you've seen this sort of desire on the part of the government and the establishment of sort of redefining Pakistan's regional vision, and in terms of human security, economic development, and all that. So at least the
Hmm.
rhetoric is there, but unfortunately, as I said, that somehow was not there during PMLN's time. Okay, so the
So, Dr.
moment
Hussain,
was
just one last question, which is that
sure.
if we were to pick up the conversation again,
Hmm.
तो क्या reinventing the wheel करना पड़ेगा in trade relations, negotiations, या already काम बहुत हुआ है?
देखें काम तो बहुत हुआ है एंड आई वुड वांट कि वो काम वेस्ट ना हो देखें इंडियन साइड से भी हुआ हमसे एंड वी वर वर्किंग जॉइंटली बाय द वे सो वी वर वर्किंग विद ICRIA. ICRIA is a very well established research center in Delhi, and we had worked a lot. They had worked in the past on looking at informal trade between India and Pakistan. Joint हमने conferences कराई सब कुछ, तो उधर भी बहुत काम हुआ, इधर भी हुआ. और नेट देखें पाकिस्तान का गेन है इंडिया इज a much larger economy than Pakistan. It's trading with उसकी ट्रेड चाइना से it's one of the largest trading partners with China.
Right, right.
So despite its sort of border issues and so on, the trade and economic relations are normal. So the point is कि हमारा तो ज़्यादा इंटरेस्ट है एंड हमने काम भी किया हुआ है उस काम को आप इस्तेमाल भी कर सकते हैं उसको आगे बढ़ाया जा सकता है. My big question or my worry is that what's the interest on that side of the border now to sort of go back to normal economic relations with Pakistan? I don't know. I mean, with the current government and that, it seems that that interest has gone down significantly compared to what it was in the early 2000s or 2010 and 12 when this discussion was happening. So things across the border have changed significantly also. So that's my point of concern. So यहाँ तो desire और want होएगी, but point is कि क्या वो उतनी है अब या नहीं है. Don't forget Pakistan's economy has been growing at what? 2.53%. So, and we're
Yeah.
in a dire economic state. So those benefits which economic benefits वो भी वो देखते हैं कि वो potentially इतने नहीं है. Okay. And then this the political conflict which has been there for the last many years, unfortunately, so that also has played a very negative role. So I'm not sure what the political incentive or the economic incentive there is now to actually normalize relations with Pakistan. There should
So
be,
you're arguing,
but
so
I'm
you're
not sure.
arguing,
Yeah.
so you're arguing that it's not just politics, but Pakistan's weak economy, which
Yes,
is
yes.
also a disincentive.
Of course. I mean, the country is in a fairly dire economic state. Yes, we have a large market, but it's not quite a growing market. It's just unfortunately a stagnating market. And the point is that, when you are not quite growing, when you become an economic basket case, nobody is really interested in talking to you or trading with you. Okay, that's
So
the
ये तो
so
so ये तो फिर चाइना भी नहीं करेगा ना हमसे बात.
देखिए चाइना के तो अपने कई मतलब ऑब्वियस इंटरेस्ट पॉलिटिकल भी है जियो पॉलिटिकल इंटरेस्ट है सब कुछ
Yeah.
है वो जो प्ले आउट करते हैं हमारे साथ उसका एक बड़ा पुराना वी हैव अ रिलेशनशिप एंड देयर इज एन इकोनॉमिक बेनिफिट व्हिच दे सी आई मीन स्पेशली सो सिंजांग की डेवलपमेंट में इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन में पाकिस्तान एज सॉर्ट ऑफ a source of raw material as a source of food
Yeah.
resource and so on and obviously transport ट्रेड के उस लिहाज से तो वो बेनिफिट है तो वो बट you're right. I mean, as your economically you become weaker and weaker, your neighboring countries, other countries, their incentive of trading with you, having economic relations with you also goes down. So that is a problem.
Right.
So both are
Dr.
interlinked. So that's the chicken and egg story. You need regionalism, you need trading, normal trading relationships with your neighbors to lift your economy up. ठीक है वो हमने
Okay.
की नहीं है इतनी उससे so we really need to so for us so it's a no brainer. We need to normalize relations. How do we go about convincing them कि hey listen you also need to come across the table and talk to us. So that is the challenge now.
Thank you, Dr. Turab Hussain, for telling us and giving us this one major lesson that Pakistan needs to improve trade relations in South Asia with its neighbors. And,
Yes.
there shouldn't be any question on it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're most welcome. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hafiz.